Standing outside the glass office, I listened to my husband tell his mistress that I was too lookless for the company retreat. "Do not invite my wife," Henry laughed. "She kills the vibe. She is not high caliber enough for a venue like Silverwater Estate." I smoothed my skirt, forcing a cold smile. He thought I did not belong at the luxury mansion. He had no idea he was banning me from the very home I inherited 10 years ago. My name is Aurora Hayes, and for the last 5 years I have been the invisible spine of Helix Wave Technologies. I wrote the code for our first viable product while Henry slept on the couch. I designed the branding strategy that secured our Series B funding while he took the credit in Forbes. But standing outside the frosted glass doors of the CEO's office, pressing my hand against the cold metal frame, I realized that to my husband I was nothing more than a stain on his perfectly polished lapel. I heard his voice filter through the gap in the door, smooth and dismissive. "Do not put Aurora on the list for the retreat." "Sir," Henry said. I could picture him checking his reflection in the window, adjusting his tie. "She kills the vibe in the VIP room. Honestly, having her there makes me look domestic and not in a good way." My stomach turned over, a cold knot tightening beneath my ribs. I took a breath, fixed a professional smile on my face, and pushed the door open. Henry jumped slightly, but his recovery was instant. He was a master of the pivot. That was what made him a great CEO and apparently a terrible husband. "Aurora," he said, his voice dropping into that fake honeyed register he used when he was about to deny a budget request. "I did not hear you come in." "I can see that," I said, keeping my voice even. I walked straight to his desk, ignoring the way his assistant, Sarah, wouldn't meet my eyes. She grabbed her tablet and skewered out of the room like a frightened mouse. "I was just coming to ask about the itinerary for the Helix Wave Vision Summit. I haven't received the calendar invite yet, and I need to coordinate the product launch presentation with the engineering team." Henry sighed, the sound of a man burdened by the immense weight of dealing with a slow child. He walked around his desk and leaned against the edge, crossing his arms. It was his power pose. "About that," he said, "I have been thinking. The summit this year is different. It is at Silverwater Estate." He said the name with a reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. "I know the venue." I said, "It is on the coast. It is not just a venue." "Aurora," he corrected me, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "It is a statement. Silverwater is the playground of the absolute elite. We are talking about billionaires, old money, the kind of people who can smell fear and mediocrity from a mile away. I need to be in full networking mode. I need to be the shark." He reached out and patted my shoulder, a gesture so patronizing it took every ounce of my self-control not to slap his hand away. "And you, sweetie," he continued, "you are lovely, but you have that teacher's energy. You know, that part-time musician vibe. It is cute for the house, but out there, it is going to make me look like I brought my nanny along. It will make networking difficult if I have to constantly explain why my wife is wearing department store slacks in a room full of bespoke Italian silk." The insult landed with precision. He was referring to the 3 years I spent teaching piano to support us while he poured our savings into his startup. He called it my starving artist phase at dinner parties, turning my sacrifice into a quirky anecdote about his patience. "I am the director of product marketing, Henry," I said, my voice hardening. "I just saved the iCloud deal with that rebranding strategy last week, the one that brought in $50 million. I think I have earned a seat at the table." Henry waved his hand dismissively. "That was good work. Sure, but this retreat is about the future. It is about vision, and frankly, you are better at the operational details behind the scenes where you shine." Before I could respond, the door opened without a knock. The anchor Rose walked in. She was our head of brand experience, a title Henry had invented 6 months ago. She was 25, sharp as a tack, and about as subtle as a neon sign. She was also the woman Henry thought he was hiding from me. "Henry, the caterers need to know if we are doing the beluga or the otra caviar for the opening garler," Bianca said, not even looking at me. She marched straight to his desk, holding out a swatch of fabric. She was wearing a cream-colored Powers suit that probably cost more than my first car. Her shoes were red-bottom stilettos, clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. "Oh, hi, Aurora," she said, finally acknowledging my existence. Her eyes swept over me, lingering on my shoes. They were practical black pumps, sensible for a 12-hour workday. "I love that you just prioritize comfort over everything. It is so brave. I could never wear heels that are chunky. My ankles are just too delicate." The air in the room shifted. It was a two-on-one ambush, and they both knew it. "The anchor was just helping me finalize the guest list," Henry said quickly, stepping between us slightly. "Right." The anchor smiled, a predator showing its teeth. "The list is extremely tight this year. Aurora, we really wanted to keep the caliber high. Strictly seal executives and key stakeholders. We didn't want to dilute the brand equity of the event with too many support staff." Support staff. I looked from Bianca to Henry. I was the only director-level employee being excluded. Even the VP of Human Resources, who had been hired 2 months ago, was going. This wasn't about capacity. This was an eraser. "Silverwater Estate," I said, testing the name on my tongue again. "It sounds incredibly familiar." "I doubt it." Henry laughed, a short, sharp bark of a sound. "It belongs to some reclusive family dynasty. The Stirrings, crazy musicians, totally detached from reality. The place is practically a fortress. It cost the company a fortune to book it, but it is worth it. We are going to have some heavy hitters there. Victor Lang is flying in." I froze. Victor Lang, the owner of Lyrican Media, the billionaire music mogul. "Yes," Henry beamed, puffing out his chest. "He is looking for the next big tech investment. If I can get him in a room, play him the pitch. Helix Wave goes global. That is why the vibe has to be perfect. Aurora, Victor Lang is a man of taste. He surrounds himself with genius. I cannot have him distracted by us playing house, so I am a distraction." I stated. "You are a liability," Henry said, dropping the mask for just a second. His eyes were cold, void of the warmth he used to fake when he needed my signature on a loan guarantee. "Look, take the weekend off. Go to a spa. Buy yourself some new shoes. Use my card. Just let the adults handle business." The anchor giggled, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. "That sounds lovely, doesn't it? Aurora, a little station. You look like you need the rest. You have been looking so tired lately." I looked at my husband. I looked at the woman standing next to him, wearing the diamond earrings I suspected were bought with the bonus from the deal I had closed. "Enjoy the retreat, Henry," I said softly. I turned on my heel and walked out. I did not slam the door. I did not scream. I walked with the measured rhythmic pace of a metronome. The open plan office was buzzing with activity. But as I walked down the main aisle, the noise dampened. Heads bowed toward computer screens a fraction too quickly. Eyes darted away. They all knew. The assistant had probably slacked the entire admin team the moment Henry gave the order. "The wife is out. The mistress is in." I could feel their pity sticking to my skin like humidity. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, the burning sensation of public humiliation. It was a cold burn, like dry ice. "Do not let them smell blood." My mother's voice echoed in my head. "If you bleed, they will feast. Swallow it." I made it to my cubicle. Yes, I was still in a cubicle while Bianca had a corner office with a view. I sat down and stared at my computer screen. My hands were shaking just slightly. I clasped them together, forcing them to be still. I opened the shared company calendar. I needed to see it in writing. There it was, blocked out for the entire upcoming weekend in bright Helix Wave blue. Event Helix Wave Vision Summit location Silverwater Estate, the Hamptons. And then right below the location in the small print automatically populated by the venue's booking system was a line of text that made my heart stop beating for a full second, hosted by Maxwell Sterling. I stared at the name. The letter seemed to vibrate on the screen. Maxwell Sterling. Henry thought the owner was just some crazy musician. He had no idea. He had called the owner reclusive. He was right about that. I had spent 10 years running from that name. I had changed my last name, buried my history, and refused every trust fund check. I had wanted to be loved for myself, not for the Sterling Empire. I had wanted to build something real with Henry. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a small battered mirror, I used for touch-ups. I looked with my own eyes. They were the same shade of gray as the storm clouds over the Atlantic Ocean, the same eyes that stared down from the oil painting in the grand foyer of Silverwater Estate. Henry was afraid I would ruin his networking because I was just a piano teacher. He was worried I was not high caliber enough for the venue. I looked back at the screen hosted by Maxwell Sterling, my grandfather. A cold, terrifying calm washed over me. The shaking in my hands stopped completely. Henry wanted a show at Silverwater Estate. He wanted to impress the elite. He wanted to play with the big boys. I reached for my phone. It was time to make a call I had avoided for a decade. If my husband wanted to visit my family home, who was I to deny him the full experience? Silverwater Estate was not just a house. It was a cathedral built to worship sound. I closed my eyes in my cubicle, blocking out the hum of the fluorescent lights. And for a moment I was 6 years old again. I could smell the sea salt mixed with the scent of old mahogany and lemon polish. I could feel the cold ivory keys of the Steinway under my small fingers. My grandfather, Maxwell Sterling, would sit in his velvet armchair, eyes closed, conducting an invisible orchestra with one hand while holding a glass of scotch in the other. "Play it again, Aurora," he would rumble, his voice like distant thunder. "But this time, do not play the notes. Play the silence between them." I was raised to be a prodigy. The Sterling name was royalty in the music world. My grandfather was not just a composer. He was the founder of Sterling Sound Group, the conglomerate that owned half the patents on high-fidelity audio technology used in stadiums and concert halls worldwide. But my mother hated the weight of that legacy. She wanted me to have scraped knees and a normal childhood, not blistered fingertips and a trust fund that isolated me from the world. So we left. We took the name Hayes, her maiden name before the Sterling marriage, and moved to a modest suburb. I grew up in two fractured worlds. In the summers, I was the eyes to a musical empire trained by the finest maestros in Europe. In the school year, I was Aurora Hayes, the scholarship kid who played piano in the cafeteria for extra lunch money. I chose a normal life. I chose obscurity. And then I chose Henry. I met him in a business ethics class at university, a class he barely passed. Ironically, he was wearing a threadbare sweater and had a hunger in his eyes that I mistook for passion. He was the boy from the wrong side of the tracks, desperate to climb. I was the girl with the secret fortune who wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she owned. "Your music," he told me on our third date, watching me play a Chopin nocturne on a battered upright piano in the student union. "It is going to be my greatest asset." He caught himself quickly, flashing that boyish grin. "I mean our greatest asset. It is beautiful. Aurora, you see the world differently. I need that vision." I believed him. God, I was so desperate to believe him when we married. Helix Wave was nothing but a laptop and a pile of debt. Henry had the technical skills, but he had zero taste. He wanted to sell software. I wanted to sell an experience. I worked 18 hours a day. I designed the logo. I wrote the copy for the website. I created the entire brand identity that positioned Helix Wave as a luxury tech provider rather than just another back-end utility. I did it all for free. Sweat equity, Henry called it. We are partners. Aurora 5050 always. But as the company grew, the we started to shrink. After our series of funding round, Henry came home with a bottle of champagne and a new organizational chart. "The investors are a little confused about your role," he said, pouring me a glass of cheap bubbly. "Having a wife as a co-founder makes us look like a mom and pop shop. It scares the venture capitalists. They want corporate structure." So I became a marketing specialist. A year later, when we hit 5 million in revenue, I was promoted sideways to product marketing manager. "It is cleaner this way," Henry explained, smoothing down his new bespoke suit. "I need to present a narrative of a self-made tech genius. The lone wolf story sells. Aurora, you know that you are the branding expert." I let him erase me. I told myself it was for the good of the company. I told myself I did not need the glory. I had my music. But even that he stole last year for the launch of our flagship audio processing software. Henry needed a demo track, something emotional, he said. something that would make the investors cry. I spent 3 weeks composing a piece. I poured my frustration, my loneliness, and my silent grief into those bars. Henry played it at the launch event in San Francisco. The audience gave him a standing ovation. When asked about the composer, he smiled humbly and said, "We used an AI algorithm." I tweaked myself. Incredible what technology can do, isn't it? I sat in the audience, clapping until my palms stung, while a piece of my soul was attributed to a line of code. I should have left him then, but I was trapped in the sunk cost fallacy of my own marriage. I had severed ties with Maxwell to prove I could make it on my own. If I went back to Silverwater now, divorced and defeated, I would be admitting that my mother was wrong, that I was too weak for the real world. So I ignored the emails from my grandfather's estate lawyer. I let the calls go to voicemail, and I ignored the signs closer to home. The late-night texts Henry claimed were from developers in a different time zone. The sudden need for privacy when he was on his phone. And then Bianca rose. She joined the company 8 months ago. Young, hungry, and willing to laugh at Henry's terrible jokes. Suddenly, Henry had strategy meetings that lasted until midnight. He came home smelling of a perfume that was sharper and more expensive than mine. "You are being paranoid," he would say when I asked, rolling his eyes. "You artists are all the same. So emotional, so dramatic." Bianca is a colleague. She understands the brand. Honestly, Aurora, you should be grateful someone is helping me carry the load since you seem so focused on your little piano lessons. He gaslit me so effectively that I started to question my own sanity. Maybe I was just a jealous aging wife. Maybe I wasn't executive material. Maybe I really was just a piano teacher playing dress-up in a boardroom. I looked down at my hands resting on my desk. They were strong hands, capable hands. They had played Rachmaninoff at age 12. They had built a marketing strategy for a multi-million-dollar company. And now they were trembling with a rage I had suppressed for 5 years. I opened the folder on my computer labeled Archive. Inside were the original project files for the branding campaigns. The timestamps proved everything. The metadata on the audio files proved the music was mine. I had the receipts. I had always kept the receipts. Henry thought he had buried me. He thought he had slowly, methodically painted over the mural of my contributions until the canvas was blank white. He thought I was just Aurora Hayes, the suburban wife who cooked his dinner and warmed his bed and stayed in the shadows. He had forgotten that before I was a Hayes, I was a Sterling. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I had not called since the day I walked down the aisle. The phone rang once, twice. Silverwater Estate. A crisp, familiar voice answered. It was Elias, the butler who had practically raised me. "Hello, Elias," I said, my voice steady for the first time all day. His grandfather, and there was a pause, a heavy silence that spanned 10 years of absence. "Miss Aurora," Elias whispered, and I could hear the emotion in his voice. "He is in the music room. He has been waiting for this call for a very long time." "Tell him I am coming home," I said, "and tell him I am bringing guests, about 50 of them, and Elias." "Yes, yes. Make sure the Steinway is tuned. I have a performance to prepare for." I held up the phone. I looked at the picture of Henry and me on my desk taken on our honeymoon. He was looking at the camera. I was looking at him. I took the frame and placed it face down in the trash can. The support staff was clocking out. The AIS was clocking in, and she had a score to settle one note at a time. The air in the main conference hall was recycled and stale, but Henry stood on the stage light. He was inhaling pure oxygen. He paced back and forth in front of the massive projection screen, his clicker in hand, radiating the kind of manic energy that usually preceded a funding announcement or a layoff. 500 employees sat in rows of gray chairs, their faces illuminated by the blue light of their laptops. "Team," Henry boomed, his voice amplified by the surround sound system I had helped select 3 years ago. "We are not just a tech company. We are a movement, and a movement needs a headquarters that reflects its ambition." He clicked the remote. The screen behind him exploded into Haidafin color. A collective gasp rippled through the room. On the screen was a drone shot of a sprawling stone mansion perched on a cliff edge overlooking a churning steel-gray ocean. The architecture was a seamless blend of classic Gothic revival and modern glass extensions. I stopped breathing. My hand froze over my notepad. I knew that cliff. I knew the way the wind screamed around the corner of the east wing in November. I knew the exact creak of the third step on the wooden bridge visible in the bottom left corner of the photo. The bridge where I used to sit for hours trying to memorize boach while the sea spray hit my face. "Welcome," Henry announced, spreading his arms wide as if he had built the place himself to Silverwater Estate. I stared at the image of my childhood home. It looked exactly the same as the day I left, imposing and lonely, a fortress built to keep the world out. And now my husband was selling it to his employees as a party venue. "This is where the Helix Wave Vision Summit will happen," Henry continued. "We have secured exclusive access. This property is usually closed to the public. It belongs to the Sterling family, a dynasty of reclusive musical geniuses, but for one weekend, it belongs to us." He clicked again. A slide appeared titled Attendee List Phase 1. "This retreat is for the core leadership," Henry explained, his tone shifting to something more serious. "We are bringing in our biggest investors. We are hosting Victor Lang. We need the room to be filled with decision makers, closers, people who embody the future of this company." I scanned the list projected on the screen. Chief Executive Officer Henry Caldwell, Chief Financial Officer David Chen, Chief Technology Officer Marcus Thorne, VP of Sales, VP of Engineering, Head of Brand Experience, Bianca Rose, Executive Assistant to CEO Sarah Miller. I read the list again. I read it a third time. My eyes moved down to the Director section. The Director of Operations was there. The Director of HR was there. My name was nowhere. I was the Director of Product Marketing. I led the team that was currently driving 60% of the company's user engagement, and I was not on the list. The silence in the room felt heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I could feel people shifting in their seats. A few heads turned slightly in my direction, then quickly snapped back to the front, terrified of making eye contact. "Now," Henry said, "I want to invite Bianca up to talk about the vibe. As you know, image is everything." Bianca bounced up the stairs to the stage, taking the microphone from Henry. Her hand lingered on his arm for a fraction of a second too long before she turned to the audience. She flashed a dazzling practice smile. "Hi, everyone," she chirped. "So, Silverwater is not just a hotel. It is a sanctuary of high art. We need to match that energy. I have put together a mood board for the dress code." She clicked the remote. Images of sleek avant-garde fashion appeared. Sharp lines, muted colors, expensive fabrics. "We want tech royalty," Bianca explained using air quotes. "We want to look like we own the place. We need to avoid anything too casual. No florals, no off-the-rack polyesters." She laughed, a light, tinkling sound that echoed through the silent room. "We need to avoid that suburban wife vibe. You know the look, the kind that says, 'I got lost on my way to the grocery store and ended up in a VIP lounge.' We cannot have that. It kills the mystique." The insult was precise, surgical, and public. I was wearing a floral blouse. I bought it at a department store. The room was agonizingly quiet. I could hear the hum of the projector fan. Then the sound of typing started. Soft, rapid clicks of keyboards. I glanced at the laptop of the junior developer sitting in the row in front of me. His Slack window was open. A message popped up in the general chat, though he quickly minimized it. "Did she just roast Aurora awkward? Is Aurora not going? But she runs the product line. Henry is savage." My phone lay silent on my lap. No one messaged me. No one looked at me. I was isolated in a room of 500 people, drowning in a sea of corporate indifference. I kept my back straight. I kept my chin up. Do not let them smell blood. The meeting ended 10 minutes later as the crowd shuffled out, parting around me like water around a stone. I stood up and walked directly toward the stage. Henry was busy shaking hands with the VP of Sales, laughing about golf handicaps. The anchor was already gone, probably off to terrorize the catering staff. "Henry," I said. He turned, his smile faltering for a microsecond before he composed himself. "Aurora, great meeting, right? The team is pumped. My office now." I did not wait for an answer. I walked out of the auditorium and straight down the hall to the CEO's office. I stood by the window, looking out at the parking lot, counting the cars to keep my heart rate down. Henry walked in a moment later, closing the door behind him. He sighed, leaning against the door frame. "If this is about the list," he started, checking his watch. "I really do not have time for a domestic dispute. I have a call with Tokyo in 15 minutes. "It is not a domestic dispute," I said, turning to face him. "It is a professional inquiry. I am the director of product marketing. I am leading the launch that this entire summit is built around. Why am I not on the attendee list?" Henry walked over to his desk and sat down, putting a physical barrier between us. He clasped his hands on top of his leather blotter. "Aurora, look," he said, his voice dropping to that patronizing, reasonable tone he used when he was lying. I ran the numbers. We had limited spots. And frankly, this is a strategic decision. It is about executive presence. Executive presence, I repeated. "Yes," Henry said, "you are great at execution, the grunt work. But silver waiter, that is a different league. We are going to be rubbing shoulders with billionaires, Victor Lang, the Sterling Estate trustees. These people speak a different language, a language of power. And he gestured vaguely at me, waving his hand up and down my body. "You just do not project that global authority. You are too soft, too accessible." I closed the Omicloud deal. I reminded him, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts. "I spoke their language just fine then. That was over Zoom." Henry dismissed. "In person, it is different. Your style is a bit budget. Your clothes, your mannerisms. It screams support staff, and that is fine, Aurora. That is who you are. You are the nurturer. But at Silver Water I need killers. I cannot risk an investor looking at you and thinking Helix Wave is a small-time operation because the CEO's wife looks like she should be baking cookies." I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes, but I forced them back. I would not give him the satisfaction. "You mentioned Victor Lang." I said, "He is there for the music connection. I have a degree in classical piano performance. I have studied music theory for 20 years. I could help you connect with him on a level you cannot even understand." Henry threw his head back and laughed. It was a genuine amused laugh. "Oh, honey," he chuckled, wiping the corner of his eye. "Please, you taught piano to 6-year-olds in our living room to pay for groceries. Do not confuse that with what Victor Lang does. He discovers geniuses. He deals with virtuosos. If you start talking to him about Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or whatever you played in those student bars, he will laugh us out of the room." He stood up, signaling the conversation was over. "Stay here," Henry said, picking up a file. "Manage the team. Make sure the servers do not crash while we are gone. That is where you provide value. Aurora, keep the lights on while the big boys go out and hunt." He walked past me, opening the door. "Oh, and maybe use the weekend to go shopping," he added over his shoulder. The anchor was right about the floral. "It is a little depressing." The door clicked shut. I stood alone in the office that smelled of his cologne, a scent I had bought him for his birthday. My hands were clenched into fists at my sides. My nails dug into my palms, sharp and painful. He thought I lacked caliber. He thought I was on budget. He thought my musical background was a joke. He was going to my house. He was going to walk the halls where I learned to walk. He was going to drink wine in the room where I learned to read music. And he was going to do it with his mistress, mocking me the entire time. I walked over to his desk on his notepad. He had scribbled a reminder. "Impress line. Memorize one classical fact." I picked up the pen and drew a single sharp line through the note. If Henry was worried that I would lower the standard at Silverwater Estate, he had nothing to fear. I was not going to go as Aurora Hayes, the floral-wearing, cookie-baking marketing manager. I was going to go as Aurora Sterling. And when I was done, he would realize that he had not just left his wife off the list. He had declared war on the landlord. I walked out of the office, past the open space where 500 hens were bowed in pretend work. I did not look at the floor. I looked straight ahead. I had a plane to catch. My apartment was silent when I unlocked the door, a stark contrast to the buzzing humiliation of the office. It was a modest 2-bedroom on the 4th floor of a walk-up. The kind of place Henry called quaint when we were dating and embarrassing once Helix Wave hit its first million. I dropped my bag on the floor and looked at the living room. In the corner stood my upright piano. It was second-hand, chipped at the leg with a slightly sticky middle C key. It was the instrument of Aurora Hayes, the struggling marketing manager and part-time teacher. Then my eyes drifted to the high shelf above the kitchen cabinets. There, covered in a thin layer of dust, sat a wooden box. Inside was a bottle of vintage wine, a gift sent to me 10 years ago on my wedding day. There was no card attached, just the return address, Silverwater Estate. I had never opened it. I had never even acknowledged receiving it. I pulled a step stool over, climbed up, and took the box down. I wiped the dust off the lid with my sleeve. 10 years of silence. 10 years of pretending I did not have a safety net, just to prove to my mother and to myself that I could survive the real world. I sat down on my beige sofa, the box on my lap, and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contact I had never deleted, stored simply as MS. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that clashed with the cold resolve settling in my gut. I pressed the call button. It rang 3 times. "Speak," a voice answered. It was not a question. It was a command. The voice was deeper than I remembered, raspy with age, like the sound of a cello bow dragged across rough strings, but the authority was undanished. "Grandfather," I said. There was a pause on the other end, long enough for me to hear the faint sound of ocean waves in the background. Or maybe that was just my memory filling in the blanks. "Aurora," Maxwell Sterling said. He did not sound surprised. He sounded like a man who had been checking his watch, waiting for a train that was running late. "You still have the same number." "I do. And you are calling me on a Tuesday afternoon, which means you are not calling to wish me a happy birthday, since that was 4 months ago." I closed my eyes. "I am sorry I missed it. I did not expect a card," he said dryly. "You made your point very clearly when you left. You wanted to be independent. You wanted to be Hayes. So tell me, Aurora Hayes, how is independent life treating you?" I looked at the chipped piano. I thought of Bianca's smirk. I thought of Henry's voice telling me I lacked caliber. "It is overrated," I said. A low rumbling sound came through the speaker. A chuckle. "Finally, I have waited a decade for you to admit that." "I am not calling for money," I said quickly, my pride flaring up one last time. "Then hang up," Maxwell countered. "If you are calling for a chat, I am busy. I am composing. I am calling because my husband is hosting a retreat at your house this weekend," I said, cutting to the chase. "And he just told me I am not allowed to go because I am not highest enough for the venue." The silence that followed was different. It was colder. When Maxwell spoke again, the amusement was gone. "He said that to Sterling. He does not know I am Sterling. He thinks I am just a piano teacher he allows to work in his marketing department." "The arrogance of the man," Maxwell muttered. "I should have crushed him during the seed round." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean?" "We will get to that." He dismissed. "So he banned you from your own inheritance, and now you are calling me. Why do you want me to cancel the booking? Throw them out on the street. I can have the lawyers draft a breach of contract notice in 20 minutes. "No," I said, "I do not want you to save me. Grandfather, I do not want you to fight my battle." "And what do you want?" "I want access." I said, "I am coming to the retreat, but not as his wife. I am coming as your granddaughter. I need you to authorize the jet to pick me up tomorrow morning. I want to arrive a day before the Helix Wave team, and I need the staff to be completely silent. No one calls me Mrs. Caldwell. No one reveals who I am until I'm ready." "You want to ambush him." "I want to educate him," I corrected. "He cares about branding." "Fine. I am going to give him a rebranding he will never forget." "Listen to me, Aurora," Maxwell said, his tone shifting. It was no longer the voice of a grandfather, but the voice of the patriarch who had survived 50 years in the cutthroat music industry. "This is not a game. You walked away from this family because you wanted a simple life. If you walk back through those gates as Aurora Sterling, there is no going back. You cannot put the crown on and then take it off when it gets heavy. If you claim your seat at the table, you stay at the table. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the suburban wife comment. I thought about the 10 years I had spent shrinking myself to fit into Henry's world only to find out there was no room for me there anyway. I am done being invisible, I said. Good, Maxwell said. The jet will be at Teterboro at 8:00 in the morning. Elias will be waiting for you at the house. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, he said. There is something you should know. Your husband likes to brag about his fundraising skills, does he not? He calls himself a visionary, I said bitterly. He says he charmed the capital out of a silent angel investor group. Yes, Maxwell said. The Archipelago Fund. That is the one. That is me, Maxwell said. I froze. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. But I own 30% of Helix Wave Aurora, he said calmly. I bought in during the Series B and C rounds through a shell company. Why do you think a mediocre startup with a decent interface but shaky backend architecture got funded so easily? My head was spinning. Henry had spent years telling me how he had grinded for that money. He had looked down on me for being risk-averse while he was out hunting whales. You gave him the money, I whispered. I invested in you, Maxwell corrected. I knew you were doing the real work. I saw the marketing materials. I recognized your cadence in the copy. I recognized your aesthetic in the design. I bet on my blood. Aurora, I just let him hold the checkbook. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, hysterical then sharp. Henry was strutting around acting like a king, completely unaware that he was building his castle with bricks paid for by the wife he was currently cheating on. Does he know? I asked. No one knows. Not even the board. But I think it is time the board found out who actually holds the leash. Don't you? Yes, I breathed. Yes, I think it is. One more thing, Maxwell added. Victor Lang is coming. You saw that on the guest list. Yes, Henry is terrified of him. Victor is coming as my personal guest, Maxwell revealed. He is looking for a new muse. He is tired of the pop stars manufactured by algorithms. He wants a soul. He wants raw talent. I told him I might have someone for him to meet. My breath hitched. Grandfather, I have not played professionally in a decade, but you have played, he said. I know you have. I can hear it in your voice. You are wound tight. Aurora, you need to release it. Bring your music. The real music, not that commercial jingle trash you wrote for your husband. How did you know about that? I keep an eye on my investments, he said. I will see you tomorrow. Welcome home. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the black screen of my phone. The balance of power had shifted so violently. I felt dizzy. Henry wasn't just a cheater. He was a fraud. And I wasn't just a scorned wife. I was his boss's boss. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I grabbed a corkscrew from the drawer. I took the bottle of wine out of the box. It was a Chateau Margaux, 1996. A bottle worth more than Henry's car. I popped the cork. The sound echoed in the empty apartment like a gunshot. I poured a glass, the dark red liquid swirling against the crystal. I took a sip. It tasted like oak, dark berries, and vengeance. I opened my laptop. It was time to work. I logged into the Helix Wave server using my admin credentials. Henry didn't know I still had from the days when I was the one setting up the IT infrastructure. I started downloading. I pulled the email chains between Henry and Bianca where they mocked the board members they were supposed to be impressing. I pulled the original metadata from the On the Cloud campaign files showing my user ID as the creator of every single asset. I found the audio files for the commercial jingle. I found the emails where I sent the draft to Henry and his reply, "It's okay, but maybe we should use a stock track." And then the invoice, where he paid a sound engineer who turned out to be his college buddy $5,000 to essentially put his name on my work. I compiled it all. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. I created a master folder labeled simply the recital. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Henry was probably packing his bags, picking out his power suit, thinking he was about to have the weekend of his life. He thought he was going to Silver Water to be a king. I took another sip of wine. You want a show, Henry? I whispered to the reflection in the glass. I will give you a show. I looked back at the piano. Lies, I said softly, testing a word. You built a house of lies on my foundation. I turned off the lights. I didn't need to practice. The music was already screaming in my head, demanding to be let out. Lies, I whispered again. But the piano never lies. I went to the bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. I didn't pack the floral blouses. I didn't pack the sensible slacks. I reached into the back of my closet, past the winter coats to a garment bag I had kept hidden away. I unzipped it. Inside was a black silk evening gown, backless, sleek, and dangerous. It was a sterling dress. I packed it. This time, I don't need you to save me. I just need your stage. I closed the suitcase. The zipper hissed like a snake. Tomorrow Aurora Hayes will die and Aurora Sterling would rise from the ashes. The Gulfstream G650 touched down on the private airstrip with a grace that made my commercial flights in economy feel like riding a tractor over a gravel road. I looked out the oval window at the coastline of the Hamptons rushing by. The gray Atlantic Ocean churned against the rocks, wild and indifferent to the wealth stacked up on its shores. I picked up my glass of sparkling water. I had refused the champagne the flight attendant offered. I needed a clear head. I was not here on vacation. I was here on a mission. A black town car waited on the tarmac. The driver, a man I did not recognize, opened the door with a silent nod. As we drove through the winding roads, lined with ancient oak trees and high stone walls, I felt the physical sensation of shedding my skin. The Aurora Hayes, who clipped coupons and worried about the electric bill, was dissolving. Aurora Sterling, who had learned to read sheet music before she could read English, was taking her place. We turned through the wrought iron gates of Silverwater Estate. The house rose from the cliffside like a modern fortress of glass and steel, anchored by the original stone manor that had stood there for a century. It was breathtaking, and for the last 10 years I had pretended it did not exist. The car stopped at the main entrance. The heavy oak doors opened before I could even reach for the handle. Elias stood there. He was older now. His hair was completely white, and his posture was slightly stooped, but his eyes were the same warm hazel I remembered. He wore his immaculate suit with the dignity of a general. "Welcome home, Miss Sterling," he said. Hearing my real name spoken aloud felt like a physical blow to the chest. It was not the sharp pain of injury, but the deep, resonant thud of a heart restarting. "Hello, Elias," I managed to say. He stepped forward and broke protocol, pulling me into a hug that smelled of starch and lavender. I buried my face in his shoulder, fighting back tears. "I kept the piano tuned," he whispered into my hair, "just in case. Do you remember when you were 7? You played the wrong C in the Mozart sonata and cried for 2 hours under the dining table." I laughed, a wet, shaky sound. "I remember. You brought me vanilla ice cream and told me that even Mozart probably hit the wrong note once or twice." "You have been away too long, Miss Aurora," he said, stepping back and looking at me with critical affection. "But you are here now. That is what matters." I walked into the foyer. The floor was checkered black and white marble, polished to a mirror shine. I walked past the grand staircase, trailing my hand along the mahogany banister. I walked into the main living area, where floor-to-ceiling glass walls looked out over the ocean. And there it was, the Steinway Model D. It sat on a raised platform in the center of the music room, black and gleaming, a beast sleeping in the sunlight. It was the instrument my grandfather had composed his Third Symphony on. It was the instrument I had learned to play scales on. I stopped in the doorway. I had spent a decade playing on a beat upright with sticky keys, convincing myself that the music was in the fingers, not the instrument. But looking at the Steinway, I realized I had been starving myself. I wandered through the house like a ghost haunting my own life. I stood on the terrace where Maxwell used to smoke his pipe and stare at the horizon, waiting for a melody to catch on the wind. I walked down the hallway lined with black and white photographs of the legends who had stayed here. Leonard Bernstein laughing in the kitchen, Yo-Yo Ma tuning his cello on the patio, and in the corner of one photo, a small blur of a girl peeking out from behind a curtain. I had cut myself out of this picture. I had erased myself from this legacy because I wanted to be normal. I wanted a husband who loved me for me. And what did I get? A husband who loved me for my utility, who treated me like an accessory he was embarrassed to wear in public. That evening the house was quiet except for the rhythmic crashing of the waves below. Maxwell and I sat in the music room. He was in his leather armchair, a glass of scotch in his hand. I sat on the piano bench, the lid of the keys still closed. "So," Maxwell said, his voice grelly, "the retreating army arrives tomorrow at noon." "Helix wave," I corrected. "Henry likes to call them visionaries. He can call them whatever he likes." Maxwell grunted. "They are guests in my house, and you are the hostess, though I suspect you have a different role in mind." "I do not want to make a scene just for the sake of drama," I said. "I want to dismantle the narrative he has built. He thinks he is a self-made genius. He thinks I am a burden. I want to show him and everyone else exactly who holds the weight." Maxwell nodded slowly. "We must be precise. We do not lie. We do not plant evidence. We do not stoop to their level of petty manipulation. We simply peel back the paint. We let them see the rot in the wood or the steel they failed to notice." "No lies," I agreed. "Just the truth played at full volume." "There is a line. Aurora," he warned, pointing a finger at me. "If you do this, you destroy the marriage completely. There is no saving face after this. You are not just embarrassing him, you are emasculating him in front of his tribe. He destroyed the marriage when he told his mistress I wasn't good enough to walk through your front door." I said coldly, "I am just signing the paperwork." The sound of a car engine in the driveway interrupted us. Maxwell checked his pocket watch. That would be Victor. "He is early," I said, panic flaring for a second. "I am not ready." "You have been ready for 20 years," Maxwell said. "Victor hates punctuality almost as much as he hates mediocrity. He likes to catch people off guard." We walked to the foyer. The doors opened, and Victor Lang swept in like a storm front. He was tall, wearing a black trench coat over a black turtleneck. His silver hair swept back. He looked exactly like his photos in the magazines, only sharper. His eyes scanned the room, assessing everything in milliseconds. "Maxwell," Victor boomed, ignoring Elias's attempt to take his coat. He strode forward and shook my grandfather's hand. "The air here is better than in Geneva. I should buy the property next door just to breathe." He turned his gaze to me. It was like being scanned by an X-ray machine. "And who is this?" Victor asked. "I thought you lived alone with your ghosts." "This is my granddaughter, Aurora," Maxwell said. "She is the one who wrote that nocturne in E minor. I sent you a recording of 10 years ago." Victor stopped. He looked at me, really looked at me with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "The nocturne?" he asked. "The one with the unresolved dominant seventh in the bridge. I thought you hired a ghostwriter for that." "Maxwell, it was too raw for a student." "I wrote it," I said, my voice steady. Victor raised an eyebrow. Did you just copy the structure of Chopin and add a little teenage angst?" He was testing me. He was insulting me to see if I would fold. Henry would have folded. Henry would have laughed nervously and agreed. "The dominant seventh wasn't unresolved," I said, meeting his gaze. "It resolved into a deceptive cadence because the piece was about betrayal. A standard resolution would have been a lie." Victor's lips twitched. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile. "Is that so?" He gestured toward the music room. "Show me." My heart hammered against my ribs. I had not played for an audience like this since my conservatory final exam. But I walked into the room. I sat at the Steinway. I lifted the full-board. The keys grinned at me. I did not play the nocturne. That was the music of a sad girl. I played something else. I played a variation of the piece Henry had stolen for his commercial, but I stripped away the glossy synthesized beat he had added. I played it the way it was meant to be heard. I started soft, the notes falling like rain, a gentle, nurturing melody, the sound of the wife who made coffee, the wife who edited slide decks at 3:00 in the morning. Then I let the left hand darken. The bass notes became heavy, discordant. The right hand sped up, turning frantic, sharp, angry. It was the sound of being erased. It was the sound of screaming behind a soundproof glass wall. I hit the final chord, a jarring open cluster that hung in the air, vibrating with tension. I lifted my hands. Silence. I turned around on the bench. Victor was not smiling anymore. He was leaning against the door frame, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowed. He looked like a wolf that had just caught the scent of blood. "You have wasted 10 years," Victor said. It wasn't a compliment. It was an accusation. "Why are you not signed?" "Life got in the way," I said. "Life is an excuse for the mediocre." Victor snapped. "You have a voice, a loud one. Tomorrow, when the corporate drones arrive, I want to hear more of that." He turned and walked away without another word. Maxwell winked at me. The next morning was a blur of tactical preparation. Elias and I walked through the main hall with the floor plans of the event. "The stage will be set here by the fireplace," Elias said, pointing to the spot where Henry planned to give his opening speech. "No," I said, "move the podium 3 feet to the left. It forces him to stand with his back to the ocean view. He will want the view behind him for the photos, but the glare at 200 will blind the camera lens. He will be a silhouette." Elias smiled. "Very good, Miss Aurora." "And the piano," I said, looking at the Steinway. "Henry thinks it is just furniture. He will probably put his drink on it." "I will ensure coasters are unavailable," Elias noted dryly. "Where is the seating chart for dinner?" Elias handed me the tablet. "Mr. Caldwell sent this over an hour ago. He has placed himself and Miss Rose at the head table with Mr. Why, he has placed the director of engineering at the back, near the kitchen." "Switch them," I said. "Put the engineers at the front. Put Henry and Bianca at table 4. It has a restricted view of the stage because of the pillar, and it is right next to the service door where the waiters come in and out." "He will be furious," Elias noted. "He is a guest." I said, "Guests do not dictate the seating arrangements to the host, and since the host is technically my grandfather, we have discretion." I spent the rest of the afternoon in the music room alone. The house was buzzing with catering staff setting up for the arrival of the Helix Wave team, but the music room was my sanctuary. I had a notebook on the music stand. I was scratching out notes, erasing them and rewriting them. I was writing a new piece. I called it "The Woman Behind the Glass." It started with a repetitive mechanical rhythm in the left hand, the daily grind, the routine, the support role. The right hand played a beautiful soaring melody that kept getting cut off, interrupted by the mechanical beat. It was a musical representation of my marriage. Every time I tried to fly, Henry pulled me back down to earth to serve his ambition. But the end of the piece was different. In the end, the mechanical rhythm broke. It shattered, and the melody broke free, ascending into a chaotic, glorious crescendo that used the entire range of the keyboard. I played the finale, my fingers flying, my breath coming in short gasps. I stopped. The last note faded into the silence of the room. I looked out the window. The Helix Wave bus would be here in an hour. Henry was coming. The anchor was coming. They thought they were walking into a victory lap. I closed the piano lid gently. "Welcome to Silver, waiter," I whispered to the empty room. "Please mind the gap between who you think you are and who you really are." I stood behind a massive stone urn filled with white hydrangeas, positioned perfectly in the shadow of the portico. From here I had a clear view of the winding driveway, the iron gates, and the stage I had set for the first act of my revenge. The Helix Wave convoy arrived with the subtlety of a military invasion. 3 sleek black luxury buses rolled up the gravel drive, kicking up dust that settled on the pristine manicured hedges. They hissed to a halt in front of the main entrance. The doors opened and Henry was the first one out. He stepped onto the cobblestones, shielding his eyes from the sun, and immediately buttoned his jacket. He turned back to the open door of the bus, extending a hand to help Bianca down, though he quickly pulled it back when he remembered the 50 employees watching from the windows. He spread his arms wide, addressing the team as they began to file out, blinking in the bright coastal light. "Welcome to the sanctuary, everyone," Henry announced, his voice booming. He gestured at the house behind him, house as if he had laid the bricks himself. "This is what success looks like. Breathe it in. This is the caliber of excellence Helix Wave is aiming for." I watched him strut. He was in his element, playing the role of the benevolent monarch, showing his subjects the promised land. The anchor stepped down, phone already in hand. She was live streaming. Of course she was. "Hey guys," she purred at her screen, panning the camera across the facade of the mansion. So, we just arrived at the venue. It is super exclusive. Honestly, it gives me major new money vibes. Like they are trying too hard with the Gothic arches, but it is a cute playground for the weekend. Look at that gargoyle. Tacky right. She laughed, unaware that the camera was focusing directly on the stained glass window above the door. The window featured the interlaced S and G of the sterling crest, the exact same geometric curvature I had used as the inspiration for the Helix Wave logo she wore on her lapel pin. Her followers were looking at the original and the knockoff side by side, and she was too busy checking her filter to notice. The Helix Wave employees huddled in the driveway, looking intimidated. They clutched their laptop bags and overnight cases, whispering about the size of the estate. Then the doors of the manor opened. It was a piece of theater Maxwell and I had choreographed the night before. Elias stepped out, followed by 12 members of the household staff. They were dressed in formal livery, standing in two perfect lines, hands clasped behind their backs. Henry beamed. He adjusted his tie and walked forward, ready to receive the differences he believed he had purchased. "Good afternoon," Henry said, projecting his CEO voice. "I am Henry Caldwell." We spoke on the phone regarding that. He stopped. The staff did not look at him. They did not bow to him. They did not even blink at him in perfect unison. 12 heads turned 30 to the left, toward the hydrangeas, toward me. I stepped out of the shadows. I was wearing a simple white linen dress, my hair loose, my feet bare against the cool stone. I looked nothing like the frantic, coffee-stained woman they saw in the office. "Welcome home, Miss Sterling." The staff chorused. The sound resonated off the stone walls. Henry froze. His hand was still half extended for a handshake that was never coming. He blinked, his brain trying to process the glitch in his reality. He looked at the staff, then at me, then back at the staff. "Stealing," he muttered, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. But behind the staff my grandfather emerged. He leaned on an ebony cane, though I knew he did not really need it. It was a prop for authority. He walked past Henry as if my husband were a piece of landscaping and came straight to me. "You are late for tea," Maxwell said, his voice carrying clearly over the silence of the driveway. He kissed me on both cheeks. Then he turned to the crowd of stunned tech workers. "I am Maxwell Sterling," he announced, "and this is my granddaughter, Aurora Sterling Hayes." A collective gasp went through the crowd. I saw Sarah, Henry's assistant, drop her phone. I saw the VP of sales jaw literally hang open. They looked at me, the woman they had ignored in the elevator, the woman they had left off email chains, the woman Bianca had called suburban, and then they looked at the house that was worth more than the entire market cap of Helix Wave. Henry was pale. He looked like a man who had just realized the parachute he packed was actually a backpack full of silverware. "Mr. Sterling," Henry stammered, stepping forward, desperate to regain control of the narrative. "I think there is a misunderstanding. Aurora is my wife. Her name is Hayes. She teaches piano. She is a Sterling," Maxwell corrected, his voice dropping the temperature in the courtyard by 10. "She took the name Hayes because she wanted to build a life on her own merits. A noble experiment, though I understand she has been working for your company in marketing." "Yes," Henry seized the lifeline. "Yes, she is a vital part of the team, a key player. That is why." "That is strange," Maxwell interrupted, "because I was under the impression she was not on the guest list." Something about what was the phrase killing the vibe. Henry made a noise that sounded like a dying radiator. "But since she is here," Maxwell continued, "and since she owns the place, I suppose we can make an exception." He extended a hand to Henry, but his eyes were hard as flint. "We have spoken via email, Mr. Caldwell, regarding the Series B funding." Henry took the hand, confused. "I don't recall I dealt with the Archipelago Fund." "I am the Archipelago Fund," Maxwell said. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched the realization hit Henry. It was a slow, agonizing process. He had spent 5 years bragging about how he had charmed the mysterious investors of the Archipelago Fund. He had told me to my face that I wouldn't understand the high-stakes pressure of dealing with them. And all along, he had been negotiating with my grandfather, spending my family's money to pay for the Mistress he was currently standing next to. "You," Henry whispered. "You are the investor." "Silent investor," Maxwell corrected. "I prefer to let the talent do the work. I assumed my granddaughter had told you. She has always been the smart one in the family." The anchor, sensing the ship was sinking, tried to pivot. She stepped forward, flashing a smile that was trembling at the edges. "Oh my God!" she squealed. "This is amazing, Aurora. You never told us. This is so humble of you. It is literally like a movie. We are so honored to be here." I looked at her. I looked at the dress code memo she had sent out, banning suburban attire. "Hello, Bianca," I said. "Nice shoes. Are those the ones you bought on the company card last month under office supplies?" The anchor's smile vanished. "Grandfather," I said, turning to Maxwell, "since Henry and his team are unfamiliar with the estate, perhaps I should handle the room assignments. I know which rooms have the best inspiration." Maxwell feigned surprise. "An excellent idea." Mr. Caldwell had sent over a list, but it seemed rather arbitrary. He snapped his fingers. Elias handed me a clipboard. "Listen up, everyone," I said, my voice projecting without effort. I had learned to project from the diaphragm in this very courtyard. "We have made some adjustments to the accommodations to better reflect the contributions of the team." I looked at the crowd. "Kevin," I called out, the marketing intern, a sweet boy who Henry regularly sent to fetch dry cleaning, raised his hand timidly. "You are in the East Tower suite," I said. "It has a 360 view of the ocean and a private balcony. I think you need the space to think." Kevin's eyes widened. "Really, really, sir." I looked at the assistant. "You are in the Rose Garden Cottage. It has a jacuzzi and a private entrance to the beach." A murmur of excitement went through the staff. I went down the list, picking out every person Henry had marginalized, bullied, or ignored, and giving them the rooms usually reserved for visiting royalty. And finally, I said, looking at the bottom of the list, "Henry and Bianca." Henry straightened up. He expected the master's suite. He had to expect the master's suite. His ego wouldn't allow him to imagine anything else. "You two will be in the garden suite," I said. Henry nodded, looking relieved. "Garden suite sounds pastoral." "It is charming," I said. "It is on the ground floor at the back." "Does it have an ocean view?" the anchor asked. "It has a view of the herb garden," I said, "and the compost bins. It is very sustainable. Also, it is right next to the commercial kitchen ventilation system. So you will wake up to the smell of bacon every morning at 5. I know how much you like to get an early start, Henry." "Aurora," Henry hissed, stepping closer to me so the others wouldn't hear. "You cannot be serious. I am the CEO. I cannot sleep next to the compost." "You are a guest," I whispered back, my voice sweet as poison, "and the master's suite is occupied by me." Before he could argue, the sound of a roaring engine cut through the air. A red convertible sped up the driveway, bypassing the buses, and screeched to a halt right next to where we were standing. The door flew open and Victor Lang stepped out. If the staff had been stunned by Maxwell, they were catatonic now. Victor Lang was a god to these people. He was the ultimate validator of cool. Henry's face transformed instantly. He pushed past me, his hand extended, ready to charm. "Mr. Lang," Henry shouted. "What an honor. I am Henry Caldwell." CEO of Victor walked right past him. He did not even break stride. He walked straight to me, took my hand, and kissed the knuckles. "Aurora," Victor said, his voice warm and intimate, "I have been thinking about that resolution you played last night. The way you deconstructed the melody, it was haunting. I want to discuss the second movement before dinner." He turned to the group, barely registering Henry's presence. "Is this the audience?" Victor asked me, looking at the Helix Wave team with mild amusement. "They look a bit corporate. Are you sure they can appreciate what you're going to play?" "We will see," I said. Henry stood there, his hands still extended into empty space. He looked at Victor, then at me. "You played for him?" Henry choked out. "Last night. You were here last night." "I flew in early," I said, checking my nails to make sure the vibe was right. "You know how I am about the vibe, Henry." I turned to the staff. "Elias, please show the guests to their rooms. Dinner is at 7. Black tie." And Henry, he looked up, dazed. "Do not be late," I said. "We would hate to start the show without the clown." I turned and walked back into the house, Victor Lang and Maxwell Sterling flanking me on either side. I did not look back, but I could feel the heat of Henry's humiliation burning a hole in my back. The game had officially begun. The evening gala was designed to be the crown jewel of the retreat. The music room, with its vated ceilings and acoustics that could catch a whisper from 50 feet away, had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the room, reflecting off the diamond jewelry of the investors and the polished silverware on the floating trays of the waiters. I wore the black silk dress I had packed in secret. It was backless with a neckline that plunged just enough to be dangerous, and it skimmed my body like liquid ink. For the first time in 5 years, I was not wearing the sensible heels Henry approved of. I was wearing strappy stilettos that made me 2 and taller than him. The room was buzzing with the low hum of expensive conversation. Money talks, but old money whispers, and tonight the Helix Wave team was trying very hard to whisper. I stood near a marble pillar, watching my husband work the room. Henry was holding a glass of scotch, my grandfather's private reserve, which I had explicitly told the staff not to serve. But Henry had likely bullied a waiter into opening, and he was holding court with 3 potential Series C investors. "You have to understand the acoustics of leadership," Henry said, gesturing grandly with his glass. "That is why I chose Silverwater. It speaks to the harmony we are building at Helix Wave. I have always had a deep appreciation for the classical masters. In fact, this room reminds me of the structure of Maxwell Sterling's Ode to Silence. You know the one, the piece he wrote for the Berlin Wall." I watched Maxwell, who was standing a few feet away, stiffen. He turned slowly, a thin razor-sharp smile cutting across his face. "Actually, Mr. Caldwell," Maxwell said, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife, "Ode to Silence was written by a contemporary of mine who died in poverty because he sold his soul to a commercial label. I believe you are thinking of my Symphony of Glass, a common mistake for the uninitiated." Henry faltered, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. "Right. Of course, Symphony of Glass. That is what I meant. Slip of the tongue." Maxwell stared at him for a second too long before turning away, dismissing him entirely. I moved through the crowd, feeling the eyes of my colleagues on me. They were looking at the dress. They were looking at the way the staff deferred to me. They were trying to reconcile the Aurora they knew, the one who made coffee in the break room with the woman who was currently hosting a billionaire. I found myself drawn to the center of the room, to the Steinway. It sat on its days, the lid propped open, exposing the gold frame and the tension of the strings inside. It was breathing. I could feel it. The anchor was standing next to the piano, holding a flute of champagne. She was wearing a red dress that was loud enough to wake the dead, and she was surrounded by a group of junior executives playing the role of the knowledgeable hostess. "It is a Steinway Model D," Bianca was saying, running a manicured hand along the curve of the wood, leaving a smudge of oil from her fingers. "Victor Lang treats this thing like a holy relic. Seriously, the insurance policy on this wood is probably more than our entire marketing budget. No one is allowed to even look at it wrong without his permission." I stepped forward. The pull was irresistible. I wanted to feel the cold ivory. I wanted to ground myself before I unleashed the storm. I reached out a hand. "Excuse me," Bianca hissed. She stepped directly in front of me, blocking my path. Her eyes were wide with a mix of panic and malice. She lowered her voice, leaning in close so only I could hear. "Don't touch his piano, Aurora." I looked at her. "Excuse me, you are drunk on the attention," she whispered, her smile tight and fake for the benefit of the room. "Just because your grandfather owns the building does not mean you have the talent to touch the equipment. This is a professional instrument. It is not one of those sticky keyboards in the student bars where you play for tips. Do not embarrass Henry. Go find a tray of appetizers to pass around or something." The audacity was breathtaking. It was perfect. I looked at her hand still resting on the wood. "You are leaving fingerprints, Bianca." "I am protecting the asset," she snapped. "Now back off. Is there a problem?" The voice came from behind me. It was deep, accented, and commanded instant obedience. Victor Lang stood there, a glass of water in his hand. He was looking at Bianca with the expression one might reserve for a cockroach on a wedding cake. "Oh, Mr. Lang." The anchor jumped back, snatching her hand away from the piano as if it burned. "No problem at all. I was just explaining to Aurora here that she needs to be careful. I know how precious this instrument is to you, and I didn't want her to damage it. She's used to, let's just say, less refined equipment." Victor looked at Bianca. Then he looked at me. "Why can she not touch it?" Victor asked quietly. "I invited her." The anchor blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Did you? But she's just, I mean she is in marketing. She is a musician." Victor corrected. He turned to me, his eyes locking onto mine. It wasn't a request. It was a challenge. "Now, I asked right now," Victor said. "The room is full. The acoustics are primed. You have a captive audience. If you have something to say, Aurora, say it." I looked at the bench. I looked at the crowd. The conversation in the room was dying down. People sensed the tension. Henry pushed his way through the circle of investors, his face pale. "Whoa, whoa," Henry said, forcing a laugh that sounded like choking. "Victor, please, let's not put Aurora on the spot. She hasn't practiced. She plays for fun. You know, it is a little hobby. It helps her relax after work. We don't want to bore everyone with amateur hour when we have so much business to discuss." He looked at me, his eyes pleading and threatening at the same time. "Don't do this. Get back in your box." Besides, Bianca chimed in, recovering her composure. "We have a curated Spotify playlist queued up for the mixer. It is very on brand." Maxwell stepped out of the shadows. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me. He nodded once. I looked at Henry. I looked at the man I had spent 10 years trying to please, the man I had shrunk myself for. "It is not a hobby, Henry," I said softly. I walked past Bianca. I sat down on the bench. The room went silent, not the polite silence of anticipation, but the awkward silence of people expecting a train wreck. I could feel their embarrassment for me. Poor Aurora. She's going to play chopsticks and humiliate herself. I placed my hands on my knees. I closed my eyes. I took a breath, inhaling the scent of the wood and the sea air drifting in from the terrace. I lifted my hands. I played the first chord of The Woman Behind the Glass. It was a soft major seventh chord, warm and inviting, a musical smile. I played the opening melody, a sweet, simple, repetitive tune in the right hand. It was the sound of yes, Henry. It was the sound of course, I will edit that for you. It was the sound of I don't mind staying late. Henry relaxed visibly. He took a sip of his drink, whispering to an investor, "She is sweet, isn't she?" "A little, the larvae." Then my left hand entered. It started as a rhythmic pulse, a heartbeat, but then it shifted. It became mechanical, rigid. A dissonance crept in a minor second, rubbing against the major melody. The sweetness of the right hand tried to continue, but the left hand began to intrude. It played louder, sharper. It started cutting off the phrases of the melody. I could feel the shift in the room. The investors stopped drinking. The smiles faded. I leaned into the keys. The music grew more complex. The good wife melody in the right hand was now fighting for survival. It was becoming frantic, running up the scales, trying to escape the mechanical, crushing weight of the bass line. I was not looking at the keys. I was looking at Henry. I poured 5 years of gaslighting into the bridge. I poured the suburban wife comment into the crescendo. I poured every stolen idea, every erased credit, every lonely night into the music. The piece shifted into the final movement, the breakage. I slammed my hands down, shattering the mechanical rhythm. The structure collapsed. The melody broke free, not as a sweet tune, but as a primal, virtuoso run that spanned the entire keyboard. It was violent. It was glorious. It was the sound of glass shattering. My fingers flew. I was playing faster than I had ever played in my life. I was sweating. My hair had fallen across my face. I didn't care. I hit the climax, a series of thundering octaves that shook the floorboards. It was a scream. It was a declaration of war. And then the final note, a single high C that hung in the air, shimmering unresolved, asking a question that dared anyone to answer. I held the note. I held it until the sound decayed into absolute silence. I sat there, my chest heaving, my hands hovering over the keys, for 5 seconds. No one breathed. The room was so quiet. I could hear the ice melting in Henry's glass. Then a single slow clap, 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 clap. Victor Lang stood up. He walked toward the piano, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made me shiver. "Braver," he whispered. Then he turned to the room, his voice booming. "That," Victor declared, pointing at me, "is not a hobby. That is a weapon." He pulled a fountain pen from his pocket. He grabbed a cocktail napkin from a passing waiter's tray. He slammed the napkin onto the polished black wood of the piano. "I am not waiting for lawyers," Victor announced. "If you are not signed, Aurora, I am claiming you now. I am offering you a 3-album deal with Lyric and Classical, and I want you to open the world tour in Vienna next month." The room exploded. It wasn't polite applause. It was pandemonium. The investors were clapping. The staff was cheering. Even the Helix Wave employees were applauding. Swept up in the sheer force of the moment, Henry stood frozen. His glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor with a crash, shattering into 100 pieces. The sound was tiny, insignificant compared to the ovation surrounding me. He stared at me, his eyes wide, his mouth open. He looked at Victor, the billionaire he had been trying to court for years, the man who was currently begging his wife to sign a contract on a napkin. He looked at Bianca, who had retreated into the shadows, her face pale and terrified. And then he looked back at me. I stood up. I smoothed my dress. I looked him dead in the eye. He had told me I wasn't high caliber. He had told me I was a liability. I watched the realization dawn on him. He hadn't just lost a wife. He hadn't just lost a marketing director. He had lost the star of the show. I picked up the pen Victor offered me. "I think," I said, my voice amplified by the acoustics of the room, "I can make space in my schedule." The applause had barely faded when Henry gripped my elbow. His fingers were tight, too tight, digging into the silk of my dress. He didn't say a word, just steered me toward the library, a small wood-paneled room off the main hall filled with first editions and the smell of old paper. He slammed the door shut and locked it. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the small space. He turned to face me, and for the first time in our marriage, the mask was completely gone. There was no charming CEO, no patient husband. There was only a frightened, cornered animal. "What the hell was that?" he hissed, his voice cracking. "Are you insane? You just humiliated me in front of the entire board, in front of Victor Lang." I played the piano. "Henry," I said calmly, walking over to the heavy oak desk that had belonged to my great-grandfather. I leaned against it, crossing my arms. "You said you wanted high caliber. I gave you high caliber. You ambushed me," he shouted, pacing the room. He ran a hand through his perfectly gelled hair, ruining the style. "You set this whole thing up, the house, the staff, the performance. You did this to make me look small, to make me look like a fool in my own company." "Your company?" I asked softly. "Yes, my company." Henry jabbed a finger at his own chest. "I built Helix Wave. I took the risks. I stayed up all night pitching to investors while you were playing your little songs. I created the platform that allows you to stand here in a $3,000 dress and act like royalty. You created a narrative. I corrected, and you used me as the invisible ink." I reached into the leather satchel I had placed on the desk earlier. I pulled out a thick black folder. I dropped it on the desk. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "Read it," I said. Henry stopped pacing. He looked at the folder. "What is this?" "It is the truth," I said, "or as you like to call it, the operational details." He walked over and flipped the folder open. The first page was a print out of the original incorporation documents for Helix Wave. My name was listed clearly as co-founder with a 50% equity stake. The next page was an email chain from 3 years ago from Henry Caldwell to legal counsel, subject cap, table restructuring. "We need to dilute Aurora's shares. Move them into the employee auction pool for now. I will tell her it is temporary for the series of compliance. We can dissolve the pool later. She won't check the paperwork." Henry's face went pale. He flipped the page. It was a metadata report for the OmniCloud launch campaign. Creator Aurora Hayes. Date created August 14th, 2023. Last modified by Henry Caldwell. Notes. Rename file author to HC admin. Remove original audio track metadata. You stole my work, I said, my voice steady. You stole my title. You stole my equity. Henry looked up, his eyes wide. Aurora, this is standard business. You do not understand how these things work. Investors want a single visionary leader. I did this to protect the valuation. It was for us. For us, I laughed. A short, bitter sound. Turned to the tab marked Bianca. Henry froze. His hand hovered over the red tab, sticking out of the side of the folder. Go on, I urged. Read it. He flipped to the tab. It was a screenshot of a text thread from 6 months ago. Henry, she is dragging me down. The artist vibe is cute for a girlfriend, but for a CEO's wife, it is a liability. Bianca. So, cut her loose, Henry. I can't. Not until the IPO. She knows too much about the legacy code. I need to move her to the subsidiary first. Isolate her. Make her quit. Then the divorce is clean. She is an asset, but an easily replaceable one. Henry stared at the paper. The silence in the room was absolute. I was an asset, I repeated. Easily replaceable. That was just talk. Henry stammered. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. You know how it is. Aurora venting stress. I never meant it. I love you. We are a team. Stop, I said. The word was quiet, but it stopped him cold. Do not insult my intelligence. Not tonight. I walked around the desk and stood in front of him. I was not afraid of him anymore. I saw him for what he was, a small man standing in a big room. I did not come here to burn Helix Wave down. I said, I put 5 years of my life into that company. It is my child as much as it is yours, but I am done being the silent partner. What do you want? Henry asked, his voice trembling. You want an apology. Fine, I am sorry. I screwed up. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. I want a divorce, I said. And I want my company back. Henry recoiled. You can't. You can't take the company. I am the face of Helix Wave. The market would panic. The market reacts to stability, I said. And right now you are a liability. You have exposed the company to lawsuits for intellectual property theft. You have engaged in fraud regarding the cap table, and you are sleeping with a subordinate, which is a violation of the ethics clause in your own employment contract. I pointed to the folder. I have enough here to get you fired for cause. Henry, no severance, no golden parachute, just a box for your desk plant and a security escort out of the building. Henry slumped against the bookshelf. He looked defeated. But I am feeling generous. I continued. So, here is the deal. I slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. You will announce your resignation as CEO tomorrow morning. Health reasons. You want to spend more time with your family. It is a classic line. People will buy it. You will retain a symbolic seat on the board, but no voting power. You will sign the divorce papers uncontested. We split the assets 5,050, the real assets, Henry, including the hidden accounts. In exchange, this folder stays in this room. The fraud stays buried. You get to walk away with your reputation intact and enough money to start another startup somewhere far away. Henry looked at the paper. He looked at me. His eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a trick. And if I refuse, he challenged, trying to summon a shred of his old arrogance. You think the board will believe a disgruntled wife over their CEO? I have the board in my pocket. Did you? The voice came from the corner of the room. The secret door in the bookcase, a panel that looked like a row of encyclopedias, clicked open. Maxwell Sterling stepped out. Henry jumped about a foot in the air. Jesus! Henry shouted. How long have you been there? Long enough to hear you call my granddaughter a replaceable asset, Maxwell said. His voice was dangerously low. I have built empires on less evidence than she has in that folder. Mr. Caldwell. Maxwell walked over to the desk and placed his hand on the folder. And regarding the board, Maxwell added, as the managing partner of the Archipelago Fund, which holds 30% of your voting stock, and having secured the proxies of the other 2 major investors before dinner, I can assure you the board is not in your pocket. It is mine. Henry looked at Maxwell. He looked at the folder. He realized the trap had snapped shut hours ago. "You," Henry whispered, "you planned this." The whole retreat. It was a setup. It was a performance review, Maxwell corrected. "And you failed." Henry sank into a leather chair. He put his head in his hands. "I can't resign," he mumbled. "Not now. We are about to close the Series C. If I leave, the deal falls apart." "The deal is already done," I said. "Victor Lane isn't just signing me, Henry. He is interested in technology. My tech, the tech I built while you were busy networking, but he won't sign if you are at the helm. He hates liars." I looked at my watch. "It is 11:00. Take the night. Read the folder. Call your lawyer, though I wouldn't recommend using the company counsel given the conflict of interest." I walked to the door and unlocked it. "Tomorrow morning at 9," I said. "The board is meeting in the library. I suggest you have your resignation letter drafted. Make it poignant." I opened the door. "Aurora," Henry called out. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. "Or was I just a project to you, too?" The question hung in the air, heavy and sad. "I love the man I thought you were," I said. "A man who believed in my music. But that man never existed." "Did he?" "He was just a pitch deck you created to close the deal." I walked out of the library and closed the door behind me. The hallway was empty. I could hear the faint sound of laughter from the terrace, where the party was still going on. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from relief. I had done it. I had faced the monster, and I had realized he was just a man in a suit. I walked toward the staircase. I had a meeting to prepare for, and for the first time in 5 years. The agenda was entirely mine. The library of Silverwitter Estate had been transformed into a war room. The heavy velvet drapes were pulled back, letting the morning sun illuminate the dust motes dancing in the air. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves, not just of books, but of framed original scores, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, and my grandfather's own symphonies. The black musical notes seemed to stare down at the long mahogany table like thousands of judging eyes. 7 members of the Helix Wave Board of Directors sat around the table. They looked out of place in their gray suits against the backdrop of artistic history. They sipped coffee from delicate bone china cups, looking uncomfortable. Henry sat at the far end opposite Maxwell. He had shaved and put on a fresh suit, but his eyes were rimmed with red. The anchor sat behind him, clutching a notebook, her knuckles white. I sat next to Maxwell. I was not wearing a suit. I was wearing a high-necked black blouse and trousers, looking every inch the sterling Aries. "Let us begin," Maxwell said. His voice was not loud, yet it silenced the room instantly. "We are here to discuss the future of Helix Wave, and specifically the erasure of its co-founder." He gestured to me. "Aurora Hayes," Maxwell introduced, "or rather Aurora Sterling, the person who wrote your code, designed your brand, and secured your funding, and who was conveniently left off the invitation list for this summit." The chairman of the board, a stern man named Arthur Vance, leaned forward. "Henry, these are serious allegations. The documentation Mr. Sterling sent over this morning regarding the cap table." Henry stood up. He adjusted his cufflinks, flashing his practiced, reassuring smile. "Arthur, please," Henry said, his voice smooth. "Let us look at the context." Yes, Aurora was involved in the early days. She helped with some administrative tasks and graphic design, but listing her as a co-founder, that was a romantic gesture on my part, a way to make my wife feel included. He walked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "The truth is," Henry continued, lowering his voice to a confidential tone, "Or is fragile. She has an artistic temperament. She is brilliant creatively, yes, but she cracks under pressure. I moved her shares and adjusted her title to protect the company. Can you imagine if we were in the middle of the IPO roadshow and our co-founder had a breakdown because the font on the prospectus was wrong?" A few board members nodded slowly. They bought the narrative, the emotional artist versus the steady CEO. "I did it for her," Henry said, looking at me with fine pity. "I wanted to shield her from the brutality of this business. She is not built for war. She is built for melodies." Arthur Vance looked at me. "Mrs. Caldwell, do you have a response?" I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I simply slid the black folder across the polished wood to Arthur. Tab 1, I said. Emails from Henry dated 4 years ago, instructing the engineering team to strip my name from the kernel commit logs. Tab 2, the slide deck from the series A Pitch. You will notice my bio was in the draft but removed in the final version sent to investors. Arthur flipped through the pages. The silence in the room grew heavier. And tab 3, I continued, a chat log where Henry jokes with the CFO about how much money he saved by paying the wife in hubs instead of equity. Arthur stopped flipping. He looked up at Henry. The warmth was gone from his eyes. This is fraud. Henry, Arthur said, you claimed sole ownership of the IP. It is a misunderstanding, Henry argued, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. Those were jokes. Locker room talk. Look, Aurora is vindictive. We are going through a rough patch personally, and she is trying to torch the company to get back at me. She does not care about Helix Wave. She hates the tech industry. That is a lie, I said. Is it? Bianca's voice cut through the room. She stood up. She looked desperate, her eyes wide and manic. She pulled a small digital recorder from her purse. I have proof, Bianca announced. I recorded this 6 months ago during a lunch break. Just listen to her attitude. She pressed play. My voice filled the room, sounding tired and frustrated. I am so sick of the marketing strategy, Henry. I hate looking at spreadsheets. I just want to sit at the piano and play all day. I do not care about the Q3 targets. I just want to be left alone with the music. The anchor stopped the recording. She looked triumphantly at the board. You see, Bianca said, she admitted it. She hates the work. She is negligent. Henry had to take over her responsibilities because she checked out. If anything, she owes the company money for the salary she took while daydreaming about piano scales. Henry exhaled, looking at Bianca with gratitude. It was a good hit. I saw doubt creeping into the faces of the board members. A reluctant founder was a liability. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. You always were sloppy with the editing software. Bianca, I said, you cut the clip too early. I connected my phone to the room's Bluetooth speaker system. Here is the full conversation, I said, from the cloud backup of the security camera in Henry's office. Since you know I installed the security system. I pressed play. My voice came through again, the same tired tone. I am so sick of the marketing strategy. Henry, I hate looking at spreadsheets. I just want to sit at the piano and play all day. I do not care about the Q3 targets. I just want to be left alone with the music. Then there was a pause, and then Henry's voice. Good, that is where you belong. Babe, you stay in the background. Let the men handle the business. You are too emotional for the boardroom anyway. Just look pretty. Play your songs and sign whatever I put in front of you. I will protect you from the big bad world. The recording ended. The silence in the library was absolute. It was cold enough to freeze water. Arthur Vance slowly closed the folder. He looked at Henry with pure disgust. You will protect her by defrauding her. Henry opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Bianca. She was trembling. There is one more thing, Maxwell said. He had been silent until now, observing the carnage like a general on a hill. He picked up a single sheet of paper. Miss Rose, Maxwell said, looking at Bianca. While my granddaughter was exposing the moral bankruptcy of your CEO, I took the liberty of having my team look into your recent communications. That is illegal. Bianca snapped. You cannot access my private email. You use the company server, Maxwell noted dryly, and you sent an email 3 days ago to the CEO of Amatec, your biggest competitor. Henry whipped his head around to stare at Bianca. But you attached a file. Maxwell read from the paper. Title, Helix Wave Product Road 2025. And the body of the email read, I can bring this with me if you can match my current salary. The ship is sinking, and I need a lifeboat. The anchor turned pale. She backed away from the table. No, that is fake. I never the timestamps are verified, Maxwell said. You are not just a mistress, Miss Rose. You are a corporate spy. And you, Henry, by sharing confidential access with her, have breached your fiduciary duty in the most catastrophic way possible. The room erupted. This is a disaster. One board member muttered, "We need to suspend them immediately." Another shouted, "The stock will tank if this leaks," Arthur Vance said, rubbing his temples. "We are in the middle of a fundraising round. If investors hear our CEO is a fraud and our head of brand is a spy, we are finished." They all turned to look at Henry. He was slumped in his chair, staring at the table. He looked small, defeated. "I can fix it," Henry whispered, but no one was listening. "There is a way out," I said. The arguing stopped. All eyes turned to me. "I do not want to be CEO," I said clearly. "I am an artist." The anchor was right about one thing. I do not want to spend my life looking at spreadsheets. Henry looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. But I continued, "I will not let this company be run by a thief." I stood up and walked to the head of the table. "Here is the proposal. Henry resigns today, citing health reasons. We keep the scandal internal. The anchor is fired for cause, and we sign a non-disclosure agreement that keeps her out of prison for corporate espionage in exchange for her silence and the leadership." Arthur asked, "You appoint the COO Margaret Liu as interim CEO. She is competent and honest," but I paused, looking around the room. "I want my 50% equity restored, and I want a seat on the board, not to run operations, but to direct the vision." "Vision?" Arthur asked. "Helix Wave has been selling itself as a cold tech utility." I said, "That is why we are losing the creative market. I want to launch a new division, the Helix Arts Fund. We will build technology specifically for artists, musicians, and creators. We will bridge the gap between silicon and soul, and I will lead that division." I looked at Henry, and to fund it, we will use the equity Henry is going to forfeit as part of our divorce settlement. Henry flinched, but he said nothing. He knew he had no cards left to play. Arthur Vance looked at the other board members. They were nodding. It was a clean exit, a way to save the company and pivot to a new lucrative market. "It is a good plan," Arthur admitted, "but the investors need reassurance. They need to know the company has a new face, a face they can trust." "They will have one," Maxwell said. He checked his pocket watch. "In 24 hours, we will release the press statement regarding Henry's resignation. But tonight, Silverwater Estate hosts the gala for the global investors." Maxwell looked at me with pride. "Tonight, Aurora will perform. We will live stream it to every Helix Wave employee and stakeholder worldwide. She will not just be playing a song. She will be debuting the new identity of the company. If the performance succeeds, if the world embraces her, then the board accepts her terms." Arthur looked at me. "Can you carry that weight, Mrs. Caldwell? You're asking us to bet the company on a piano recital." I looked at Henry, who was now just a ghost in the room. I looked at Bianca, who was weeping silently into her hands. Then I looked at the sheet music of my grandfather's symphony on the wall. "My name is not Mrs. Caldwell," I said. "My name is Aurora Sterling, and I do not play recital. I play revolutions." Arthur nodded. "You have 24 hours. Make us believe." The terrace of Silverwater Estate had been transformed into a cathedral of light and sound. The Atlantic Ocean churned against the cliffs below, a rhythmic percussion section provided by nature itself. Above us, the sky was a vast canvas of indigo velvet, pierced by the hard, white light of the stage rigging. This was not a party. It was a coronation. I stood in the wings watching the technicians adjust the microphones around the Steinway. The live stream indicators on the cameras were glowing red. 3,000 Helix Wave employees were watching from their laptops at home. 50 key investors were sitting in the velvet chairs arranged on the patio, and the world was about to see the woman Henry Caldwell had tried to hide. Victor Lang walked to the center of the stage. He did not need a script. He held the microphone with the casual confidence of a man who owned the industry. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor's voice boomed, carrying over the sound of the waves. "Tonight is not just about a corporate retreat. It is about the fusion of two worlds, technology and art. For too long, we have treated them as enemies. Tonight, we bridge that divide." He paused, letting the silence build. "I am proud to introduce the first artist signed to the new Lyric and Future project. She is not just a pianist. She is a composer. She is a visionary. And she is the bridge we have been looking for." Please welcome Aurora Sterling." He did not say Hayes. He did not say Henry's wife. He stripped away every label my husband had plastered onto me and left only the truth. I walked onto the stage. The applause was polite, but curious. The investors were still trying to figure out the politics of the situation. I walked to the microphone. The spotlight hit me, blinding and warm. I wore a white gown tonight, simple and architectural, a stark contrast to the black dress of vengeance I had worn the night before. Tonight was not about revenge. It was about rebirth. For 10 years, I said, my voice steady, I let someone else tell my story. I let them write the dialogue. I let them edit the footage. I let them decide that my music was background noise and my contributions were invisible. I looked down at the front row. Henry was sitting there. He was smiling, but it was a rich of terror. His skin had a gray waxy quality under the stage lights. Next to him, separated by 2 empty chairs, sat Bianca. She looked small. She was staring at her hands, refusing to look at the cameras, knowing that her career in this industry ended the moment the live stream started. I was told I lacked presence, I continued. I was told I was a liability, but I realized something yesterday. You cannot mute a hurricane, and you cannot edit out the truth. Tonight, I am taking the pen back. This is my story and this is my song. I sat at the piano. I did not bang the keys this time. I did not attack the instrument. The rage of the previous night had burned itself out, leaving behind something cleaner, something stronger. Clarification. I began to play. The piece was called Resignation. It started with a motif from the night before, the mechanical stifling rhythm of my marriage, but then it unraveled. I softened the edges. I turned the dissonance into a modulation. The music flowed like water breaking through a dam, not destructive, but inevitable. It was a goodbye. I played for the girl who changed her name to please her mother. I played for the woman who worked for free to build a man's ego. I played for the wife who accepted the shadows because she thought she did not deserve the light. And as I played, I let them all go. I looked out at the audience. I saw Arthur Vance, the chairman, close his eyes and nod. I saw the marketing intern, Kevin, watching with his mouth open. And I saw Henry. He was watching me, really watching me for the first time in 5 years. And in his eyes, I saw the devastating realization that he had never really known me at all. He had fallen in love with a reflection, and he had shattered the mirror. I hit the final chord. It was a major triad, bright and resonant. It was resolved perfectly. It was the sound of a door closing and a window opening. The silence held for 1 second, 2 seconds. Then the audience rose. It was a standing ovation, genuine and thunderous. Victor was clapping over his head. Maxwell was standing by the pillar, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. While the applause washed over me, I saw Maxwell move. He walked over to Henry. He did not smile. He simply handed Henry a thick, cream-colored envelope. I knew exactly what was inside. We had drafted it that morning. It was a divorce decree already signed by me, and attached to it was a property settlement. It was fair $5,050 on the liquid assets, as I had promised, but the twist was in the corporate restructuring documents beneath it. Henry opened the envelope, his hands shaking. He scanned the document. I saw his brow furrow. He looked up at me, confused. He had expected me to demand the CEO position. He had prepared his narrative. She is power-hungry. She wants to steal my job, but I had declined the throne. The document stated clearly that I, Aurora Sterling, formerly rejected the role of CEO. Instead, I nominated Margaret Liu, our brilliant but overlooked COO, to take the helm. I would take a seat on the board to oversee the new Helix Arts Fund. I had taken away his last weapon. He could not paint me as a usurper. I was a benefactor. I was giving the company to someone more qualified than both of us, ensuring the safety of the employees and the investments. I saw the fight leave Henry's body. He slumped in his chair. Maxwell leaned down and whispered something to him. I knew what he said because I had written the line for him. She chose her path. The rest is your choice. The applause was dying down. The camera crane swooped in for a close-up. Henry looked at the camera. He looked at the audience. He saw the way the wind was blowing and his survival instinct, the one thing he was actually good at, kicked in. He stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He fixed his tie. He put on his visionary mask, though it was cracked and slipping. He walked toward the stairs of the stage. He was going to try to spin this. He was going to apologize. He was going to make a speech about how proud he was of his wife, how this was all part of their shared journey, how he was stepping down to support my genius. He wanted to steal one last moment of my spotlight to save his own skin. He reached the top of the stairs. He reached for the microphone stand. Hurrah, he began, his voice choked with manufactured emotion. Honey, that was beautiful. I just want to say, I stepped in front of the microphone. I did not let him finish. I did not look at him with anger. I looked at him with the indifference of a stranger. We will speak to the lawyers. Henry, I said, my voice amplified across the entire estate and to 3,000 screens around the world. Not on my stage. I signaled to the side of the stage. Two large men in black suits. Silver waiter security. Not Helix Wade stepped out of the shadows. They did not touch him. They simply stood there, an impassable wall of reality. Mr. Caldwell, one of them said, please, the exit is this way. Henry looked at me. He looked at the security. He looked at the camera, which caught every second of his humiliation. He realized that if he argued, if he made a scene, he would be dragged off, and that would be the only clip anyone would remember. He nodded, a jerky, spasmodic motion. He turned around and walked down the stairs. The camera tracked him as he walked up the center aisle alone. The anchor did not follow him. No one looked at him. He walked into the darkness at the back of the theater and he disappeared. The applause started again, softer this time, more intimate. I turned back to the piano. One more, I whispered into the mic. I played an encore. It was short, just 16 bars. It was a melody I had written that morning while watching the sunrise over the ocean. It was light. It was airy. It sounded like seagulls and salt water and the first breath of air after being underwater for too long. I looked out at the ocean. The moon had risen, casting a silver path across the black water. I was 32 years old. I was divorced. I was the heir to a fortune I finally accepted, and I was a musician. I placed my hands in my lap. The final note drifted out to sea. I did not know what would happen tomorrow. I did not know if the album would sell. I did not know if the company would survive the transition. But as I sat there listening to the waves crash against the rocks, I knew one thing for sure. The silence was finally over. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts. Do not forget to subscribe to Azad Revenge Stories. Like the video and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people.